All right, good evening, everyone. This is the Wellness Night. My name is Dr. Ugo, and tonight we're going to talk about real solutions for true healings. I just want to be able to share the information that we have for you. I pray be a blessing to you in your health journey, and I just want to also be able to share that we, I say we, my wife, she's not on tonight. My wife Angelita, years have just taken our health to the next level, and I pray that it'll be a blessing to you on tonight. So we'll go ahead and strap in. First, we'd like to talk about what has actually changed for me and my wife. So we'll start with her testimony first, mainly because of student chronological order. She started on a system at the beginning of 2025 that really just reshaped and has continued to reshape her health and her health journey. At that time, she was struggling with a lot of different things with her health, even as a health professional, someone who, was in the office helping so many other people with their conditions. She was starting to get a lot of things going on direction. We're both in our early to mid 40s, and so say when you get your 40s, things start going downhill. We were starting to feel that most definitely. And for her specifically, she was having joint pain, a lot of belly fat in the gym about 5 to 6 times a week for at least an hour, trying to get that thing down. Still not able to really do anything about it. Anxiety, depression, acid reflux, acid lactose intolerance, not being able to eat the dairy like she'd like to be able to, and that perimenopause ways of having the hot flashes and the mood swings, but also weight instability, and so just a lot of things that she was trying to do. She was eating the way that they would say to eat. Eating a lot of salads, a lot of low calorie things. Eat more. Say eat less, move more, but it just for the job for her. And and I should say maybe she specifically was blessed to be able to come across just a phenomenal individual, Dr. Natasha, who shared a system that has been of a blessing to her. And she didn't even know what she was getting into, but she is so thankful that she found it because now she's at a point where her body fat has decreased significantly. You can see that before and after picture, how much definition she has across the whole entire body, including where that visceral fat was, that belly fat. It started to melt away. She's able to actually put on more muscle, so getting more definition. All that work and that she's putting in the gym, it's actually starting to show. But she's also able to work out less. So she's not 5 to 6 times in the gym, more like 3 to 4 times a week that she's been able to work out and get these same results consistently again for well over a year, almost closer to 2 years. Also having less joint pain, so that makes working out a heck of a lot easier to do. Less anxiety and depression to the point where she actually was able to get off of her, her antidepressant, but this is likely due to a lot of healing with the gut that allowed her to be able to get back to eating dairy, so her lactose tolerance went away, and again, hot flashes, mood swings, all decreased, and dietary restrictions and eating like a like a hamster for so long that she's back to being able to eat other different types of foods and still being able to again get the benefits that she's seeing right now. And so about 3 months after she started, I think it's about time for me to go ahead join in the fun, if you will. I didn't want to be left out any longer, and so I'll tell you a little bit about where I was. Didn't know what I was going to expect, what I checked, even really what I wanted to happen. I didn't really have any goals. I was just kind of like, hey, it sounds like something good might happen, so let me go ahead and try. But it wasn't until afterwards that I maybe had a better idea of what wasn't going well for me. A lot of brain fog at work, just having my mental that's not as sharp as they used to be, say in my 20s, my 30s. I had a lot of gambling, so I had been taking some supplements for a few years that had some benefit, but honestly, I had to keep taking them for whatever to try to continue whatever benefit I had. I also had that stubborn belly fat as well. I think I was being a little bit more accepting of it, the dad bod or whatever the case is. So, I had some, not quite really much definition in the stomach, but I guess I was thankful that maybe at the time I didn't have it maybe going over my belt line, but who knows what could have happened in time. And then there's also something really bothersome for me that had come on pretty prior to starting the system was really a lot of joint pain, a lot of arthritis, and like maybe 18 months prior to getting worse and worse and worse, and so being able to work out the way that I was, again, 4 or 5 times again, watching what I'm eating, things like that. Man, that inflammation was getting to the point. It's like I don't know how long I'll be able to actually keep up with this working out, especially for leg day. I got on the system and again, just had an amazing experience myself. I was able to actually get almost immediately a lot more mental clarity with especially one of the products that are part of that system. And so brain fog lifted almost immediately from work. But then there's also the gut issues that I was having. Pretty much got off of both of the supplements I was on and feeling much better when it comes to the gas and the bloating than I did prior to. Best I felt in years. So there's also six pack to see that that was able to burn. I was able to actually get that six pack back for the first time in decades, probably since I was a teenager. So that was exciting. But honestly, the thing that has been the most beneficial for me is that joint pain. It didn't happen right away, but sometimes these processes are taking time to come on. And but I started noticing maybe a few months in on the system, it's like, wait a minute, when I'm actually working out, I'm feeling a lot less pain than I normally would, and that pain just continues to melt away and melt away and melt away as I stay consistent with them. And to the point right now, it's like my joints haven't felt this good in well over 10 years. And so, so thankful for Dr. Natasha, if you will, sharing the system with my wife, shared with me. And so I was like, well, let's go ahead and keep sharing as we will. So we kind of kept it close to home at first, but we had heard about it actually having a lot of benefit when it comes to blood sugar control. A lot of people with diabetes actually being able to potentially reverse it, getting off their medication. This is crazy. It's anything that we hear about as pharmacists and as practitioner. It's like, hey, when people get this diagnosis of diabetes, it's there to stay. Well, we're like, if this is going to be something beneficial, let's see who we can help. And so my mom, 30-year diabetic, and so she's a nurse herself, so she definitely knew eating right, if you will. But again, still on medication. Her blood sugar was and the diabetes probably more controlled than a lot of people that I hear about, especially when I'm at work. But it's something that she had to constantly try to keep up with because of some long-term complications that could arise. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But she got in the system, and about a month and a half later, she had her blood work again. Her A1C was down to 5.1. Now, for those of you that may not know what that means, the A1C is pretty much what we use to diagnose the pre-diabetes and diabetes. Pre-diabetes starts at 5.7. So again, as a diabetic, she got her A1C levels back to normal levels. And so that really allowed her to then be able to start occasions like so many others had. And so again, that also then puts her at a much lower risk of those different complications because again, now her blood sugar is where it ought to be. And so we're so thankful for that opportunity for her to be able to get that under control. And so now we're just wanting to go out here and share as much as we can about what we're learning about, well, why is this system even working and how is it helping so many other people? And so we've learned so much in the last year and a half, and I'm praying that we can actually bless you with some of that information on tonight. And in this situation, on this night, we're going to be focusing on diabetes. So the name of the talk tonight is going to be called Understanding Diabetes, the True Root Behind It. So I pray that, again, it'll be a blessing to you. So again, go ahead and lock in. And first, we're going to talk about, well, diabetes. Well, what is it? It is going to be a condition, putting it very simply, where the blood sugar stays too high, especially over too long of a period of time. And so there's actually two types of diabetes. There's type 1 diabetes, where the body just stops making insulin. Insulin is going to be something we're talking about a lot throughout the course of this discussion, but pretty much it's a hormone in the body that helps us to regulate our blood sugar, typically getting our blood sugar down. And so, again, if we're not getting that produced by the body like it's supposed to, now in order to be able to keep our blood sugars down, we actually have to keep giving insulin to ourselves pretty much for the rest of our lives. So that's type 1 diabetes, but there's also type 2 diabetes. And so this is when the body actually just stops listening to insulin. So your body is making insulin like it should, but your body's not listening to it. Well, that becomes problematic because if it's not listening to it and to insulin, then it's and still not able to really be able to regulate as it should. So it often develops over time and is strongly linked to lifestyle. It's really more related to our metabolic health. So the vast majority of cases, in this case, 90% of diabetes cases are type 2. And so a lot of the focus tonight is going to be with type 2 diabetes. So pretty much from this point on, when I say diabetes, that's really what I'm talking about. It's going to be that type 2 diabetes. And so a question that a lot of people are asking is like, well, why is diabetes so common now? Well, is it? Well, over 38 million diabetes have diabetes. But the crazy thing is that almost 1 in 3 adults have pre-diabetes. Well, for those that may not know, there's probably about 350 million, maybe plus Americans. And so when we talk about 1 in 3 adults, now we're talking about over 100 million people have pre-diabetes. Crazy thing is that when it comes to the pre-diabetes and diabetes, so many people don't even know that they have it. And so with pre-diabetes, 80 to 90% of people who have it don't even know that they have it. It's not much better for diabetes with 30 to 40%. And so that's going to be a pretty big deal when you have something that can, we'll talk about, some of the dangers that come with diabetes, at least in the long term, to have something brewing and having no clue that it's actually taking place. And when it comes to that, it's because, it takes a while for us to potentially get a diagnosis. When we're getting that diagnosis, we're typically looking at one specific thing, especially in our blood work. What's that going to be? It's going to be sugar. Well, at the end of the day, diabetes isn't just about sugar. It's something that's actually working underneath the surface before it actually becomes a blood sugar problem. And so we're going to talk about what that is. Problem that actually is brewing underneath the surface that actually gives cause to makes the way for diabetes to actually show up in the first place is going to be something called insulin resistance. Again, we talked about diabetes being something where our blood sugar is elevated, but an elevated blood sugar is actually just a symptom of this insulin resistance. Now, I talked about before how with type 2 diabetes, the body isn't listening to insulin like it should. That's essentially what we have with insulin resistance. The cells of our body are resisting the impact and the effectiveness and the effect, I should say, of insulin. So when this is happening, again, we're really not listening to insulin as effectively as we should, which means that its ability to, again, bring the blood sugar down that's being accomplished. Blood sugar is going to come down or it just starts building up and up and up. And what's happening with diabetes is that most people are developing it for over the course of decades. And when I say it's developing, it's because insulin resistance is just slowly but surely building and mounting and getting worse and worse and worse. So it could be 5 to 10 years potentially before we're having a diagnosis. But for a lot of people, it could be 10 to 20 years. We're talking about decades of insulin resistance brewing underneath the surface before we actually get a diagnosis of maybe prediabetes or diabetes. So one of the biggest things that it helps to be able to know and understand is, well, what does insulin actually do? Again, I've been mentioning that it does help with regulating our blood sugar. Well, we'll start with, what actually causes our blood sugar to go up. That's typically going to be when we eat. All right. So when we eat, our food gets broken down in the intestines, and then those nutrients get actually absorbed into our bloodstream. Well, part of those different compounds that get broken down are going to be the carbohydrates that you can get broken down into something called glucose, or what we call sugar. So this sugar gets into the system as a source of fuel. Matter of fact, it's the body's first source of fuel. If there's sugar in the system, it's going to use that first before it tries to use any other source of energy. And so the sugar gets into our cells, and how do our cells actually then get that sugar into the cells? That's where insulin comes in. So once we get a little glucose, a little sugar in our system, the pancreas gets word of it and it starts pumping out insulin. So that's where the part of the body that actually pumps out the insulin, and insulin starts to go to the body, and it opens the door like a key. Finds those insulin receptors. You can say that those are the key holes, and now it opens the door. Sugar is able to get into these cells, and now these cells get energy, and that blood sugar is actually able to come down. So it's not just, again, floating around the bloodstream like we honestly wouldn't want it to be with, like we have with diabetes. Now, the problem is that when we have insulin resistance, again, that's not happening. We're not having that sugar actually getting into the cells. We're not having the cells listening to insulin. Well, why is that happening? Well, it starts first with us eating too much food. And typically not necessarily large amounts, but it's types of foods that we're eating and how often we're eating. The more we're eating, the more frequently we're eating, the more we're causing insulin to be released. Well, what happens is that these insulin receptors on our cells, if they see insulin around all the time, they stop wanting to listen to insulin as much as they should. If you can think about like an alcoholic who actually is drinking alcohol all the time, it's going to take more and more and more of an effect to be able to actually get buzz or to feel anything. We're having to drink so much more just to be able to, again, just get some sort of response from the body. It starts to be the same thing when it comes to insulin resistance. Insulin starts getting pumped out more and more and more. If it's too frequently, then the effect of the sugar coming down, the sugar getting into the cells starts to die down. And the body's response is just to pump out more and more insulin. And so you make a lot of insulin, the cells stop listening to it because it's, again, it's just too much. What can also happen is that now the sugar, instead of going into the cells, starts actually getting broken down. Actually not broken down, but stored as fat. And so we have a lot of times people who have weight gain along with their diagnosis of diabetes. But again, since we're not getting that energy into the cells where we need it, we start to feel tired and sluggish. The body sees that and it's kind of like, oh, well, we need more energy. So let's go ahead and release some hunger hormones so that we eat more food. So we eat more food, but then we have to pump out more insulin. The insulin causes us to be more resistant to insulin, and we have this cycle going on and on and on until it gets worse and worse and worse when it comes to our blood sugar control. So again, when we're having insulin resistance, this blood sugar is not getting into the system. It's staying in the bloodstream. It's starting to get higher and higher and higher amounts, and that's what leads us to having regular blood sugar, to having prediabetes, to having diabetes, and so on and so forth. And now, all throughout this process, the body keeps trying to fix the problem by pumping out more and more insulin. But when it does this, and the more insulin that we get pumped out, then the more our bodies stop wanting to listen to it. The cells say, hey, yelling louder, if you will, is not going to cause me to listen. I'm actually going to step back further, which then makes the body, again, want to pump out even more. So, again, how is this developing? Is it doing it? But pretty much we can, what actually is happening in the body. Frequent blood sugar spikes. So when we're eating all day long, which is probably the first way that we're really driving a or really driving this insulin resistance is that we're eating these 5 to 6 times a week, 5 to 6 times a day, and so that's something that we hear about very frequently. Matter of fact, sometimes it's actually promoted. Hey, we want to stimulate our metabolism, eat 5 to 6 times a day, but it's actually putting our metabolism down because we're not able to actually process the sugar once we get insulin resistant. If insulin again is getting pumped out every single time we eat, even if we're talking about a snack, even if we're talking about a heart healthy snack, if you will, which a lot of times honestly ends up being carbs, which gets broken down into sugar. That's going to cause our insulin to go up. So if we're eating 5 to 6 times a day, like a newborn babe, every 2 to 3 hours, now we're going to have these blood sugar spikes and these insulin spikes every 2 to 3 hours. Again, insulin stick around all day long to keep us insulin resistant. The body's just not trying to see insulin that frequently. But it's not just the frequency. Sometimes it can be how much insulin needs to get pumped out. And so that's going to be with these highly processed foods. A lot of these foods nowadays have been processed in such a way that when we eat them, our blood sugars go through the roof. So if the blood sugar goes through the roof, then our body pumps out a whole bunch of insulin to try to get that sugar back down. And so again, we could be eating frequently. That's one problem. But then we could also potentially needing a whole bunch of insulin to deal with the type of sugar load that we're actually getting into our system because of the types of foods that we're eating. So this is where eating real food as opposed to processed foods can be very beneficial in this process of dealing with insulin resistance. And then there's also chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation can actually affect our body's ability to be able to process and to listen to insulin in and of itself. So it's something a little bit different than insulin resistance. And we're going to talk about, well, what's one of the main drivers of chronic inflammation? That's going to be our gut and poor gut health. So if we have poor gut health, that's actually going to be a very significant driver of inflammation throughout the system, which again can lead to insulin resistance or at least contribute to it. And so when we're talking about our gut health, one of the biggest drivers of good gut health, or say potentially poor gut health, is going to be the balance of the different bacteria in our gut. So when we have our good gut bacteria decreasing in numbers, which is typically going to be also again tied to our diet, then it's going to influence our ability to have good gut health and to metabolize the food that we have good metabolism. So again, poor gut health. Now we're going to be increasing this inflammation. Inflammation starts in the gut, but it doesn't stay there. It typically then starts to spread out to the rest of the body. But one of the things that these inflammatory markers and things like that, or we call them endotoxins that get released from the gut that they get to our cells, they get to those insulin receptors. Those would be the keyholes, if you will. And pretty much it tells them, hey, don't listen to insulin. We don't need to be doing any of that. And so that obviously becomes very problematic. In essence, it triggers, in essence, insulin resistance by that pathway. And so we have two different ways potentially where we have poor gut health and potentially if we're eating, mentioned on the previous slide, now we have two different ways that we're actually getting to a place of resistance. And again, which will eventually cause those blood sugars to go up. Now, why does all this matter when it comes to our health? It's because of the long-term complications of diabetes. So having high blood sugar in and of itself, doesn't necessarily do anything until it's happening over a long period of time and it's having an impact on very important organs in the body. So we can start with heart disease and stroke. And so we're having more have a likelihood of us having some blockages in the arteries for those particular organs. And so from there, now we're actually getting to a point where we're at a 2 to 4 times more higher likelihood of having a stroke or a heart attack when we have diabetes. We're talking about kidney disease. That's something where we can actually lead to dialysis if it's not taken care of. We're having poor blood sugar control, poor diabetes control over time. We may have the nerve damage, which affects, again, our nerve pain and our ability to be able to feel, especially usually in the extremities and our digits. So that's something that can be very common for patients who have uncontrolled diabetes. Also have vision problems where we can actually lose our vision. That's something that can also happen as well. And also poor wound healing. What that can lead to is when we're having sores and ulcers, which can get to the point where they don't even heal anymore. They're not getting the circulation, things like they need. That can lead to amputations of, of different parts of the body, typically again in the extremity. So this is not necessarily the fear monger, but for those who have diabetes or have family members who have diabetes, this is why it's so important to be able to make sure that we're actually getting it under control. Well, with getting it under control, we'll talk about what has been the traditional approach for doing this. Well, pretty much the main thing that we have been focusing as a medical society is, well, if we're going to say diabetes is going to be defined as having high blood sugar, we're going to talk about how we get that blood sugar down. Well, first we talk about lifestyle changes, and we try to lower our blood sugar numbers with diet and exercise. Again, we're talking about eating less and moving more, potentially eating less carbohydrates. Again, since they actually get broken down into sugar, especially processed carbs. Those are things that can really drive it. And so those are good approaches, but for a lot of people, it just doesn't seem to be enough to get the job done. It's not really, causing things to reverse to the point where it's just kind of like, hey, my sugars are coming down. I don't need medication. Well, that ends up being then the next step. And so, as a pharmacist, I can definitely tell you that that's something that can be effective for bringing that blood sugar down. One of the main ones that gets started for patients with type 2 diabetes is going to be that metformin. That's usually one of the first go-to, if you will. But we also have the GLP-1s that are very popular nowadays. Honestly, probably the popularity there is for weight loss, but they also help with bringing our blood sugar down. As a matter of fact, GLP-1s were first used for diabetes before their benefits with weight loss is actually discovered later on. And then we also have insulin. So again, kind of like how the body does it, it's like, hey, if we can hit the body with enough insulin, that's going to overcome the insulin resistance and cause that blood sugar to come down. Again, as I talked about before, that just makes the body a little bit more insulin resistant because it's like, whoa, even more insulin, but it can potentially overcome it. But generally with higher and higher doses over time because it becomes less effective as the body becomes more insulin resistant. And so that's for actually trying to get the blood sugar down. But if this doesn't become effective enough over time, then slowly but surely you may have these complications that I was talking about. And so now we're dealing with how to actually just take care of those. And so it becomes less about medications and things like having stents after a heart attack or having a stroke to kind of open up those blockages that took place because of the damage to the vessels that came from the diabetes, maybe even amputation because of, again, the poor wound healing that we get for a lot of patients with uncontrolled diabetes, or even dialysis, which is a result of having kidney disease where the kidneys just completely fail on us. So again, these approaches are based upon, well, what do we do when we're kind of dealing with what's above the surface? Well, what if we actually dealt with the root? What if we dealt with what's going on underneath the surface, which is the insulin resistance? If we can actually get to the root of the problem, then the problem itself kind of goes away itself. And so from there, we want to talk about some strategies that we can use to actually reverse insulin resistance. So I'm talk about stabilizing the blood sugar, making sure that the blood sugar isn't going up and down throughout the day, especially having those really high blood sugar spikes, because when you have blood sugar spikes, it means having insulin spikes. If blood sugar goes to the roof, insulin has to go through the roof to actually come and get it down. And when it comes to becoming insulin sensitive, which is the opposite of being insulin resistant, we want to have insulin come around as little as possible instead of, again, seeing it all the time. So part of that is not just how frequently we're eating, but again, if we can make sure that when we eat, insulin's not going to the roof, that's very important. Supporting gut health, like we talked about before, how poor gut health can lead to insulin resistance to a different way. And then I also want to give the body time to rest. I'm talking about the body, I'm talking about or talking about rest, I should say. We're talking about resting from food. So if we're not eating all day, then that means that our blood sugar is not spiking all day and our insulin is not spiking all day. and again, less insulin we have throughout the day, that again is leading us towards that insulin sensitivity. And so, pretty much two powerful strategies that we can really leverage to be able to get our get our insulin resistance reversed is going to be, again, blood sugar stabilization, making sure that we're not having our blood sugar spike throughout the day. And then, again, decreases our insulin requirements from our body to actually bring that blood sugar down. But then also strategic fasting period. So, what is fasting for people that may ask? This is going to be when you're not. So I probably hear about this a lot when it comes to religious practices, but it's just simply just not eating. A lot of times we have fasting labs and you say, hey, after 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock the night before, don't eat anything before you get labs the next morning. That means that you again have been fasting, not eating for a significant period of time before those labs. Well, we can actually then leverage that for reversing insulin resistance by not having food in our system, not having blood sugar coming up, which means that we're not having insulin in our systems, and it helps us to be more insulin sensitive. Another thing about that that can be beneficial is actually losing weight. I mentioned before that weight gain also typically comes with diabetes, but that's because it's also just something that's highly associated with insulin resistance. We have high levels of insulin being pumped into the system again because we're trying to overcome that insulin resistance. The body just keeps pumping out more and more insulin from the pancreas. That actually tells our fat cells to, hey, hold on to your fat, don't let it go. Just keep holding it on. And so this is what actually then drives weight gain. And so we become insulin sensitive again. Insulin's not around all the time. Now our bodies are able to be like, okay, you can let go of that fat. You can use it for energy. Once you start burning that fat for energy, then you also start burning away some of those love handles as well. And so, what do people experience when they're actually reversing this insulin resistance? They're having, of course, healthier blood sugar levels, as you can imagine from all that we talked about today. But they also have better energy, probably because, again, that sugar is able to get into the cells as opposed to being blocked from the insulin resistance. Also have the fat loss and the weight loss, reduce inflammation and pain. Again, if this is something where we're also especially helping to get our gut health back together, we'll talk about how we can do that in a second. But also it leads to increased muscle mass. One thing you may not know is that insulin resistance of the muscle causes you to actually lose muscle mass. Causes even if you're working out, you're trying to get those gains just go right out the back door. Will become insulin sensitive again, you actually hold on to that muscle, and then just an overall improvement in metabolic health. And so I hope this has been, again, a great information for you when it comes to what do we need to do in order to get a little bit of the control back when it comes to dealing with diabetes, whether for ourselves, maybe for a loved one. But I also want to talk about how we can actually put this into practice very simply. And again, the system that me and my wife have been able to not only benefit from, but to help other people with. We're hoping to maybe be able to help someone who may need something to actually get them over the hump and get them a little bit further along where they've been stuck on their health journey. So the name of this system is called the Feel Great System or the Feel Great Protocol, mainly because it does one thing. It really helps people to feel great, typically not just in one way or two ways, but in a lot of different ways, just like it did for me and my wife. So I hope that be the experience for anyone who would actually get on the system. But with that, I want to talk about what is it actually doing? What is it actually helping with? Well, it's a lot of what we've been talking about tonight, which is that insulin resistance. So I want you to kind of focus here on the left. We've talked a lot about how diabetes um, is affected by insulin resistance, and you see diabetes here. But and we talked about a little bit very quickly about what it can do with weight gain, obesity. But diabetes, I say, insulin resistance is a very strong driver for a lot of different chronic conditions. We have high blood pressure here, which a lot of people are dealing with, high cholesterol, which actually isn't noted here, I don't believe, but unless I'm missing it, yeah. High cholesterol is very strongly driven by this insulin resistance. Even when it comes to the sexual health of men and women, polycystic ovarian syndrome, one of the leading causes of infertility for women, it's going to be driven by mainly, honestly, probably more than anything else, insulin resistance. But erectile dysfunction also affecting men, again, driven by insulin resistance. We also have migraine. Talked about nerve pain, which is what neuropathy is, but even Alzheimer's disease, they're calling it type 3 diabetes. So just like type 2 diabetes, they're calling it disease type 3 diabetes because of the risk that we have of Alzheimer's disease and insulin resistance. Matter of fact, if you're diabetic, you have about an 80% more likelihood of having Alzheimer's disease than the rest of the population. So yeah, we have these chronic conditions that we have these diagnoses for, but it can also be to the point where we also have situations where things aren't necessarily at that point of a diagnosis of high blood pressure or high blood sugar. It could be simply that we're having some belly fat. It could be that we're having constant hunger, that even after we eat, we actually still feel tired, constant cravings for carbs, uh, always being wanting to go to use the restroom, to urinate, always wanting to get something to drink, always feeling thirsty. It could be sleep apnea. It could be inflammation, especially in the joints, like I was having myself. My wife is having as well. It could be dark folds around the skin tags. All these things might be precursors to a diagnosis of something a little bit longer along, a little bit along, coming along the way. But again, all things that could be related to insulin resistance to kind of let us know, like, if I actually know about these signs and symptoms of insulin resistance, maybe I can start doing something before it gets to the point where I actually have a full-blown chronic condition on it. And so, what's driving, this insulin resistance problem? It's going to be our modern food environment. It's going to be the modern diet dilemma. And so, one of the biggest things that's actually driving it is going to be how often we're eating. So, we already talked about that, where we're eating so frequently throughout the day. That's going to be causing those blood sugar spikes and those blood insulin spikes all throughout the day. Body's constantly seeing insulin, but again, not just simply how often we're eating, but what we're eating. Again, these processed foods, one of the biggest things about the processing of the foods is that it's taking the fiber out of these foods. We take the fiber out of these foods by processing it. Fiber is one of the biggest and most important ways that we can actually blunt blood sugar spikes after a meal. That fiber actually helps whatever carbohydrates that we have in the food that we're eating to get into the bloodstream a lot more slowly. And so even though you can actually potentially have food that has a decent amount of carbs in it, say like um, fruits and things like that, they typically though come with that buffer. They come with, if they're not processed, they come with that fiber that helps again that blood sugar not spike. But if we have something like an apple, we take away the fiber, now we have apple juice. So you can have an organic apple, take away that organic fiber, and now you have organic apple juice. And you're like, hey, it's organic. Sounds great. But that apple juice is going to be spiking your blood sugar up so much more than the apple would because, again, we have no longer that buffer that's there. Even the same thing, we even have white rice and stuff that doesn't necessarily taste sweet. It's still something that is a carb or a complex carb. And so we take away the fiber, goes from wild rice to white rice. And again, a lot of people have probably heard how white rice and things like that, pasta, things like that, breads and cereals can cause our blood sugar to go up. Again, may not necessarily be anything that tastes sweet, but again, we've had the fiber taken away from it. And again, it's going to be getting that blood sugar up. Another thing about taking the fiber away is that we talk about gut health. Our guts actually need fiber to feed the good gut bacteria. So I talked about how good gut bacteria may be in low levels, which can lead to poor gut health. Well, a lot of it's because we're just not getting enough fiber in our systems. And honestly, if we're eating so much processed foods, which you go to the grocery store, 75% of the food there, 70 to 75% is ultra processed. Now we're dealing with a lot of food that doesn't have enough fiber for our systems. And so again, our good gut bacteria aren't actually able to sustain, much life. They're not able to thrive, and that can as well lead to some bad bacteria running the show, causing a lot of the inflammation that we have there and in the rest of the body. So how are we able to actually start to reverse this? Well, the system does it with two different ways with two different products. The first being the fiber um, matrix called balance. So it's bringing that fiber back into our system. So like I just mentioned, so many of us aren't getting enough fiber. That should put a number to it. Only 3% of Americans are getting the minimum requirement of fiber in their system, which means that pretty much just about everybody's not getting enough fiber. But it's not just about getting a good amount of fiber. There are so many different types of bacteria and microbes in our gut, and some of them like this type of fiber from this type of plant, maybe from broccoli. This one might like a fiber from this particular fruit, this particular vegetable. And so we don't just want to necessarily get a lot of fiber in our system, but we also want to get a variety of fiber. And so this balanced product, it actually has 7 different plant-based sources of fiber. So every time you're taking it, it's pretty much your gut is getting Thanksgiving meal every single time. It's getting all the different variety that it can want. So the first thing it's doing is actually feeding that good gut bacteria. We actually don't take fiber into our own bodies. Fiber is not for us. It's literally for these gut bacteria. And so when we actually can start to feed the gut and heal the gut, then things like the IBS, so that's like the lactose intolerance that my wife was able to reverse, the constipation, the diarrhea, the gas and the bloating that I was able to, again, be able to get off the supplements that I was on. Even skin, a lot of the toxins and things like that that come from the gut, they get into the body, and the body's like, how do we get rid of it? We're trying to get it out through the skin. That causes our skin to look kind of crazy. And then also anxiety and depression. So we're learning now that there's a very strong connection between what goes on in our gut and what goes on in our mind. It's called the gut-brain axis. Look it up if you want to. But this actually helped with my wife when she got her gut health back together. She was able to get off of the antidepressant that she was taking for anxiety and depression. And so, again, very powerful way to get into good gut health. But we also talked about how that inflammation that coming from the gut can also affect insulin resistance. Well, another thing that this product does is that when you're taking it right before a meal, it'll actually help to decrease that blood sugar spike. Again, it helps that blood sugar to get into the bloodstream a lot more slowly. So the University of Sydney is actually very well studied to the point that it's in the physician's desk reference. That's where we have a lot of our prescription medications where doctors can go and find information about that. This same product is there because it's been well studied in this case, been found to decrease blood sugar spikes after a meal by over 43%. But it's not just blood sugar. We talked a lot about that tonight. But the Cleveland Clinic, which is the #1 heart hospital in the world. Matter of fact, if you go online and start trying to become a online medical doctor and try to diagnose things yourself, you're going to see a ton of different content from the Cleveland Clinic. They found and studied this particular product again, very well studied by very reputable institutions. Such a product, if taken regularly, can reduce cardiovascular risk on a population basis and potentially decrease the need and or dose for lipid lowering or cholesterol lowering prescription drugs. So I talked about how insulin resistance drives high cholesterol as well. This is something that can actually help somebody who is actually struggling with that, trying to again get their cholesterol levels together. This product works wonderfully for that. But again, we don't just use this product by itself as much benefit as it has. We actually use it in tandem with another product called Unimate, which helps make fasting easier. Like I said, this is one of the biggest ways fasting to really tackle insulin resistance. So what it does is that it actually helps us to feel full and satisfied as we sip on this throughout the day. How is it able to do that? Well, it's actually able to do something very popular medications for weight loss, like I mentioned before, GLP-1s are trying to do, and I mean, they're actually successful in doing it, but this one does it naturally. It helps to produce 60 to 70% more of your body's own GLP-1 than it was making before. And one of the things that GLP-1, when it gets into the brain, is to help you feel full and satisfied. And so that helps getting through a fast to be a much easier prospect than trying to grit and bear through it. Again, if we didn't have anything like this, again, the benefits of fasting are there, but this again helps actually make that a lot easier. It does other things too, helps you to give a lot of good energy, also helps to give you decreasing that inflammation through something called chlorogenic acid. So that's one of the main things that it actually produces and gives to the body. And that, again, with, helping with the inflammation is going to, again, if we've got poor gut health going on, helping to get that under control. And it also helps to really stimulate the metabolism of the cells in the liver. So for people who have fatty liver disease, it's helping to actually burn that fat off a little bit better there. So a lot of amazing benefits that it has there and that it can have. And definitely not saying that it will have all these benefits for everyone who tries it, but so many people have actually had a lot of benefit from it. And so when we put these two together, we have a solution to a lot of problems that people are having. And again, in a very natural way. And not saying that these things will be handled and taken care of completely, but a lot of people have a lot of benefit once they're able to tackle their insulin resistance and tackle that poor gut health. And so, again, it's been well studied. It's also got 5 patents on this particular system. Again, the clinical studies are there, safe and natural to the point where we actually can use these products in pregnant women, women who are nursing, even young children. One of my daughter's classmates a couple of years ago, so this is back when she was in 3rd grade, her mother was worried. Her doctor was saying, hey, no, she's not even 10 years old yet. We're wanting to put her on cholesterol medication. Well, she got her on the system and she started to lose weight. Those cholesterol numbers started to come down again because it's a all natural system, 100% plant-based, again, just safe all around. With that, it's also guaranteed to work. So the company believes so much in the product, what it's able to do, it has a 90-day money-back guarantee that can actually be utilized if, for whatever reason, after 90 days, you're like, hey, I've been using this consistently. I've seen no benefit. you can actually get your money back. It also is cost neutral. So if we're using the system as it should, well, it actually should get to a point where, when it comes to our grocery bill, it's actually something that we don't necessarily have to have an extra bill to use this and leverage this. Talk about that in a second. And it's to the point where it's helping people in so many different countries. I know it says 50 plus countries there, but it's actually now more than 60 countries that have been able to benefit from this field grade system. So we have the two products there. And this is a little diagram of how we actually use it throughout the day. I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide, but I want to talk a little bit more about it being cost neutral. Typically, what we're doing with this system is using that Unimate tea. I talked about it helps to boost the GLP-1, take away those hunger, the hunger pains, to decrease what's going on when it comes to um, what we're feeling and wanting to eat all day. If we're taking out breakfast, that's typically the way that we would want to do it. Then it helps us to do what we call intermittent fasting. So if we take about a whole entire meal, we're talking about decreasing our daily budget, if you will, by $5 to $10. Well, it can potentially be more if we're staying away from snacks as well. Well, that $5 to $10 would pretty much help to pay for the system, because the system is $159 a month, which the math is a little bit more than $5 a day. And so that really allows us to not only just simply get on the system, but if we're doing it and getting these benefits, it also helps us to now be able to not necessarily drive our cost up as well. And so how does this actually work? Throughout the day, pretty much what we're going to do is we start the day with the Unimate tea. So we've been fasting throughout the night. Obviously, we weren't up eating during the nighttime. And so instead of eating breakfast, which we've always the most important meal of the day, you get this tea instead. And it helps us to actually, again, feel full and satisfied while we're also now getting our fat burn going on. Talked about before how, if we have insulin around, it's going to help us to hold on to the fat. Well, if we're not eating, then we burn through all of the sugar, because that's going to be the first thing that our body wants to prioritize for fuel first. And then after it's all gone, it gets to the fat if we can make sure that we're not still eating. Well, that's what we're doing with this Unimate tea. So we keep doing that throughout the morning till we get to lunchtime. So that becomes the time we break our fast, if you will, and have breakfast. Well, before we actually have that meal, we have that balance product, which again is going to decrease that blood sugar spike, again, decreasing the amount that insulin has to come to the rescue after that meal. And again, it's going to be feeding our good gut bacteria so that they can have those to get into good gut health. Then after we eat, instead of now we've opened our feeding window, if you will, and we're like, okay, it's time to tear it up and eat everything in sight. No, we can go back to that Unimate and again keep that hunger at bay, which again allows us to get a little bit more of that fat burn going on before we get to dinner. Before we get to dinner, go ahead and again decrease that blood sugar spike afterwards by again taking that balance right before that meal. Go to sleep, wash, rinse, repeat day after day. And again, with such a simple system, it produces amazing results. So we talked about the results for me and my wife, but I want to share a few more testimonials about how this young man on the side here, on the left, got his diabetes under control, went from a A1C of 13.8, which is very elevated, down to a 5.9 while losing almost 90 pounds in the process, and his gout went away. Delana here, she had a significant improvement in her cholesterol numbers, total cholesterol going down by 76 points, triglycerides going down by 120 points. Again, you can see that she's losing weight, but at the same time, she's coming off of her medication at the same time. This gentleman here losing 50 pounds, going from an A1C of 7.9 down to 5.4. So effectively reversing his diabetes, going from a size 4XL shirt down to an XL, and again getting rid of that foot pain, that neuropathy pain. And this young lady here losing 63 pounds, no longer pre-diabetic, inflammation going away like it went for me as well. Skin clearing up, again, more likely related to the gut health being restored, and having energy all day. Just again, some amazing benefits from people that have been on this very simple two-product system. So again, it's not just these few people. So many people have had benefit from this. We see this young lady here, Jackie Lackey. She's lost over 100 pounds. We have no more high blood pressure here, IBS, acid reflux, like my wife, off of 7 medications. So just from the benefits could potentially be yours if you're at a place where it's like, I've been trying so many different things, and it seems like as time goes on, things just keep getting worse, worse, and worse with my health. I just want you to know that there's something that at least we can take a look at, give it a try, maybe if it's just for those 90 days, just to see how can this help? I've maybe been trying so many different things over the years, maybe even trying to get into that calorie deficit. It just doesn't seem to work, doesn't seem to stick. It seems very hard, not something that is easy to sustain. Again, something that like this, me and my wife have been on for over a year and a half. It's one of the simplest things that we could do for our health, but it has been so impactful. Just want to share that. I think that as children of God, we deserve to be in the best health that we can be in. We're blessed with that. And again, if that's been a struggle of yours, I just want that struggle to potentially have a chance to end, for that struggle to become a lot less of a struggle as it currently is, for you to be able to get your health back. And so, with that, I just wanted to yeah, say thank you guys for spending this time with me, for listening to this rambling pharmacist. And again, I pray that the information has been a blessing to you. And I also wanted to share a little bit of information for those that may want it. If anyone is actually, once you find a link where you can get a little bit more information about the Feel Great system, I want to share my personal website with you. So it's going to be resetwellness.info/system. So again, that's resetwellness.info/system. So I just put that in the chat for anyone at that website. But also for anyone who's just maybe wants to just learn and you're currently knowing about when it comes to this, what can actually help with getting your health together. I want to drop another link here for my email list that I have, where I'm dropping information, sharing that with you guys, so that you can learn more about not just simply some of the things that we talked about tonight, but other things like how to deal with stress, the importance of walking and things like that, especially when to walk for maximum benefit for your metabolic health. Just different ways to really improve your health metabolically. So the name of that website is going to be resetwellness.info again, but in this case it's going to be slash email dash or hyphen list. So resetwellness.info slash email dash list. So from there, if you sign up, I'll actually send you out a copy of my metabolic reset blueprint. So that'll go through a lot of information. You'll get it right in your hand right away. Some things to try to implement to get your metabolic health together. But it'll also, again, get you signed up to get continuous information from me about how you can actually, again, and I just want to be able to bless you guys as much as you deserve to be blessed. Next time. Have a great